We are continuing this series called Buzzer Beater, and I love, one of my all-time favorite movies is Hoosiers with Gene Hackman, where he plays this kind of hot-headed coach, and he'd made some mistakes early in his coaching career, so he needed a second chance. And one of his longtime friends gives him that second chance, and he's hired to coach this little bitty high school in Indiana. And he takes this high school all the way, and they actually win a state championship. And in that day, and a lot of states used to do this, that there was one state championship, and it was all the classes, A2, A3, A4, A5, all competed together in one big tournament to win that state championship. And the story's actually inspired by it. It's not the story of, it's just inspired by a school in Indiana called Milan High School. And they won, they're a little bitty school, and they won the state championship in 1954. The state of Illinois had a similar program from 1908 until 1972, that all their champions came together and they had one true state champion. And in 1939, there was a guy who was an official, he was a referee, his name was Henry V. Porter, and he wrote an article for the Illinois High School Association, and he titled the article March Madness. And a catchphrase was born. And really it was an Illinois thing. It's kind of just a regional thing until a famous sports reporter or journalist who began his career in Chicago, Illinois, writing in a newspaper up there, a guy by the name of Brent Musburger. And I thought he was super cool because he had an awesome name, right? And so Brent Musburger in 1982 used this phrase, March Madness, for the first time on a national televised game while CBS was broadcasting the NCAA men's tournament. And there's been some crazy stories of basketball games in March. That's why they call it March Madness. 2 years ago, we had one of those crazy stories where Maryland, they were a number 16 seed. It means they were ranked 6. There's a whole lot that goes into that, but they were 16, which means they barely got into the tournament. They barely qualified. And in the first round, they beat a number 1. A lot of people thought Virginia would win the national championship that year. In 1985, number 8, Villanova. They made it all the way to the Final Four and actually won the national championship. They were the lowest seeded team in the tournament to ever win the national title. The following year, in 1986, LSU, they were seeded number 11. They beat a 1, they beat a 2 seed, and they beat a 3 seed. And LSU that year made it all the way to the Final Four. They didn't win the national title, but it's certainly one of the biggest Cinderella stories of American basketball. Today's buzzer beater is a Cinderella story for sure. It's a David and Goliath before David and Goliath were a thing. For 430 years, the nation of Israel had been in slavery and bondage to the world superpower of Egypt. God had a man, he sent a man by the name of Moses to deliver them out of their slavery. The book of Exodus tells the entire story of their exiting or their exodus out of slavery and out of Egypt. But the generation that saw God do incredible miracles, they saw him delivered through 10 plagues, and they split the Red Sea. That generation, other than the generation that saw Jesus, Moses' generation, who was delivered from Egypt, they saw more miracles in the Bible than any other generation in the Bible. You know, when it came time to go and take the land that God had promised them, when it came time for them to come conquer the promised land, they let fear rob them of their faith. For something in them, they just didn't think that God was able or that God would do it. And God says, all right, if I haven't proved myself through the 10 plagues and I haven't proved myself through splitting the Red Sea, then you're just going to die off in the wilderness. And for 40 years, that faithless generation wandered in the wilderness until they all died off. Finally, God said, okay, now it's time. And a gentleman by the name of Joshua would actually be Moses' successor as the leader. And the entire book of Joshua in the Old Testament is devoted to the stories of the conquest of how they took the land that God had promised them. The battle that's recorded in Joshua chapter 10 is actually known as one of the most famous military strategies and military victories in all of world history. So the people that lived in that land, they weren't just going to give it up. And they knew that Israel was coming. They knew that Israel had defeated the massive city of Jericho. They knew that they had defeated some other little villages. And so they're like, listen, if we keep trying to take them one-on-one, we know that their God is stronger than ours. We know there's a higher power that's fighting for them. So our best chance to stop all of this is for us nations to come together, make one massive giant army, and let's go together to fight against the nation of Israel. So 5 nations unite together to fight the one nation of Israel. So I'm going to start in Joshua chapter 10, verse 5. It says, then the 5 kings of the Ammonites, the king of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, joined forces. It's now 5-1. And they moved up all their troops, and they took position against Gibeah, and they attacked it. Okay? The Gibeonites then sent word to Joshua in the camp of Gilgal. Don't abandon your servants. Come up quickly and save us. Help us, because all of the Ammonite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us. So I got to give you a little insight as to what happened there. It's an interesting story about the Gibeonites. And that's not to be confused with the Gideons that leave Bibles in hotel rooms. It's a completely different group, right? So the Gibeonites had actually deceived Joshua and the children of Israel. They knew that God had favored them. They knew that they probably didn't have a chance to defeat them. And so if you can't beat them, join them, right? So they put on their old clothes. They put on old sandals. They found some bread that was moldy. And they came to Joshua and the nation of Israel and said, listen, we have traveled a long way. This shirt was brand new when I began on this journey. These sandals were brand new. I just bought them at, Walmart. And we have traveled a long way to come and talk to you and to make peace with you. We live so far over there, it won't even be an issue. And Joshua, without praying about it, says, okay, that's fine. You live way over there. So I promise by my God in heaven that we won't harm you. We're not going to bother you. You live way over there. You won't bother us. Only to realize they'd been deceived. They lived right there. I mean, they were like closest to them. So Joshua also had to keep his word, because when he made that promise, he knew he was representing his God in heaven. And when he made that oath, he said, listen, I promise by my God that I'm not going to mess with you. Well, the Gibeonites are actually who the 5 kings are coming up against. They're like, well, we know you're allies with Israel, so we're going to take you out so then we can take them out. And so Joshua shows up to be there for his ally. Verse 7. So Joshua marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including the best of his fighting men. The Lord said to Joshua, verse 8, don't be afraid of them. I've given them into your hand, and not one of them will be able to withstand you. Verse 9, it's important. After an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them by surprise. They had no clue he was coming. The last they knew of Joshua, he was a long way away. Verse 10, it says, and the Lord threw them into confusion before Israel. I saw a documentary on this battle. That's why it's one of the most famous battles in military history, is that they marched all night long, but it wasn't just a flat march. They actually marched up into the hills. And so now they had the high ground, but Joshua also had positioned them in a place that as the sun come up, it was to their back. And so not only did they have the surprise because nobody was expecting Israel to be there, not only did they have position because they had moved into the high ground, but now they had the sun at their back. And so when the 5 armies wake up and they look up into the hills, all they hear is just this massive noise, but the glare of the sun is just like they can't really see what's going on. And it says, so Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely at Gibeon. Now that's a Cinderella story. 5 kingdoms against 1. And this one, just 40 years ago, they were slaves in Egypt. Just 40 years ago, they were making bricks and building pyramids. And now they are a fighting military machine that has the favor of God on them. It's a Cinderella story. So being a head coach is actually a twofold job, right? So if you're a coach, you got to have good coaching strategy. That was part of my problem whenever I coached, is I got out coached a lot, right? Whatever sport, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, Coaching's a lot like a chess match because this team is going to make an adjustment and you have to have a good enough strategy to know your players and know their abilities that you have to adjust to their adjustment. You have to counter. So you got to have good strategy. But the second part about being a good coach is the ability to inspire your players to play beyond their capabilities. You've got to inspire them if it's just for one game or just for one half or a quarter. You've got to get them to pull out more than what they're capable of doing. It's the culture of the program. It's the excellence that you teach your team to believe in, teach your team to believe in themselves and the athlete that's playing next to you. It's the expectations of the team and the accountability that go with that, how you behave on the field and off the field. A lot of coaches will tell you, at least the ones that are in the Hollywood movies, it's the speech that matters, right? It's that pregame speech or that halftime speech that you go in there and you get them all fired up and just. So in 1940, Ronald Reagan starred in a movie called Knute Rockne, All-American. It's based on a true story, and Ronald Reagan played the part of George Gipp. And Knute Rockne was the football coach at Notre Dame in some of their height during the 1920s. And George Gipp was his star player, but George had fallen ill. And George was actually dying. And the story goes that George Gipp, when he was dying, he asked Knute Rockne, his head coach, he said, "Coach, promise me, when things were going badly for the team, would you please inspire them and ask them, would you win one for the Gipper?" It's probably one of the most famous head coaching talks pregame in American sports history. Joshua chapter 10 records a head coach conversation. It's God talking to Joshua and the team before they go into the field of battle. It's quick. He doesn't say go win one for the Holy Spirit, go get one for the Gipper. It's just quick. It's one verse, and he says three things. He says this: the Lord said to Joshua, "Don't be afraid of them. I've given them into your hand, and not one of them will be able to withstand you." Now, I want to take those three things that God spoke to Joshua that day, and I want to take that pre-battle, that pre-game speech, if you will, and turn it into something practical that's for us. The first thing that he says to him, and if you want to take notes, I want to write this down. If you're new today with us inside that orange worship guide, one of the things that we tuck in there is just an outline where you can kind of follow along, some blanks you can fill in. If you want to, feel free to take your own notes. On your way out the doors, right there by the tables, there's some white notebooks that are 3-ring binders. Those are designed to just take one of those. Those are free. And just put your notes in there. When you come back next time, bring your notebook back. There'll be more notes. And so if you'll take some notes today, here's the first thing. God told them, fear not. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I find it interesting that God said this first. And I think the reason why God said don't be afraid first, because fear is typically our first response. Things get tense, it's just easy to get worried. When the situation turns bad, it's just fear is kind of our first reaction, if you will. Hey, don't be afraid. Well, I'm glad you said that, because I'm going to go up against 5 armies. Since you said don't be afraid, that fixes everything. I'm not nervous at all. This statement is clearly easier said than done. When talking to your kids, talking to a coworker, talking to a friend, I don't know what you're worried about. It's me. It's my emotions. It's my battle. It's my fight. It's just easier said than done. Fear is so much easier than faith. Fear is so easy. Faith is so much harder. Fear can just take your mind prisoner. It can captivate your thoughts. Faith requires that I take control of my mind. Faith requires that I kind of self-discipline my spirit. I don't know if fear and anxiety is a thing for you, but I know in my life and seasons in my story that it almost becomes crippling for me. So God said to Joshua, hey, don't be afraid. There's a couple of things that I want to give you this morning. If fear's a thing for you, just hopefully some tools I can put into your life and put into your spiritual practices. The first one is you got to remember who's saying this. You got to remember who said it. There's nothing like being a kid, having a nightmare, having a bad dream, waking up in the middle of the night in fear, and you cry out for mom or dad. And the moment that either mom or dad steps into the room, yes, you're still nervous, there's still a little fear because that dream's still lingering. But the instant that dad walks in the room, everything's better. There's nothing like being in a tight situation that you don't know how you're going to get out of, and dad walks in the room. There's nothing like coming home from school and some kid been picking on you. And sure, there's always the younger siblings, like the kid brother, that's like, well, I'll tell you what I do. I just walk up behind him and give him a big snuggie. Okay, thanks, buddy, you know. But when dad says, son, I don't necessarily want you going picking a fight. And you need to remember that every action has consequences, but sometimes the consequences are worth it. And you do what you need to do, and I got your back. Man, that chest will pop out. Next day you walk into school, you know, the confidence alone your dad has given you is game changer. Walking proud, talking loud, and drawing a crowd, because I know my daddy's got my back. You need to remember who is making this promise. When dad walks in the room, everything changes. This promise comes from your heavenly Father, and things get better when your Father walks in the room. 1 John 4:18 says, there is no fear in love. I love this. Perfect love casts out fear. There's something that happens when I get into the presence of God and He replaces fear with faith. He can bring peace into your problems. And when you are facing fear, the first thing you need to remember is who promised, I got your back. And you need to get close to the one that can help you. That means you need to get open in the Word of God and let it get into your spirit. You need to get on your knees and begin to pray and get yourself into the presence of God, because only He can replace fear with faith. You need to deepen your relationship with Him. And as you get closer to the one who said it, it's crazy how His perfect presence and His perfect love casts out fear. But secondly, when you're dealing with fear, this wasn't a suggestion. Hey, Joshua, when you get time, don't be afraid. This was actually a command. He commanded him, Joshua, don't be afraid. You have to obey. You have to obey. See, fear is an emotion. And the way that you handle and overcome emotions, the best solution for dealing with emotions is choices. Emotional decisions can be bad decisions. Decisions that are made out of fear, that's not always your best decision. Well, I'm afraid somebody's going to hurt me, so I just can't let anybody else in. We're not going to get in a small group because we did that once and it went bad. And so you stay isolated and lonely. I'm afraid of the unknown. Like I can't risk making a change. And so therefore we stay stuck and we never grow. Fear is an emotion. And what's the cure for emotions? It's choices. If your choices lead, your emotions will follow. And that's what God's saying to Joshua. Make the choice. Obey. This is a command. I know it's hard to grab a hold and tame your thoughts and tame your mind. But at some point, I have to make the choice to obey, that I'm not going to let fear dictate my destiny. I'm going to walk by faith and not by sight. Joshua, don't be afraid. Then he says this, I have given them into your hands, and not one of them will be able to withstand you. If God hands you something but you don't grasp it, then you've lost it. If God's going to give you something, you have to take it. You have to take what is yours. You have to take possession of what God has given to you. We have to take advantage of the opportunities that God gives you. We have to walk through the open doors that God opens for you. You got to walk through them. Other than on Xbox or PlayStation, I have never seen a championship won from a couch. You can't skip practice. You can't just, oh, you guys got the week off. We're going to play for the state title next week. Y'all just take the week off. You know what I'm saying? Victory takes effort. Winning is hard. Sure, sometimes get lucky. Sure, sometimes the ball or the official's call might go your way. Sometimes the other team just having a bad day. And that might get you through a half, that might get you through a game, but that won't get you through a season, and it certainly won't get you to a championship. You can't win from the couch. That's why the enemy wants to keep you on the couch. That's why the enemy wants to keep you out of the game and on the sideline. He keeps your past in front of you. Oh, you messed up too much. I ain't going to use you. Ain't nobody going to listen to you. You need to go sit down. Why you even just sit down? He's going to keep your emotions all stirred up. You can't handle this. Just sit down. Get out of the game. He keeps poking at your wounds from the past so your pain becomes paralyzing. Sit down. Just go sit on the couch. You ain't got no place up in here. And this is one of the things that I have learned about couches. Couches produce fantastic critics. They just do. Man, we're sitting back and playing couch potato and we're hollering at the TV. Couches produce fantastic critics.
This is horrible.
And the one thing
Are you kidding me? Like, okay, seriously, like who does this? Okay.
What are you?
My grandma plays better than this team plays. Are you kidding me right now? Are you joking?
Matt, what are you? I'm in the middle of something right here.
Yeah, I know more about your job than you do anyways. Okay, come on now. What are you talking about?
What?
I'm watching the game right now. Are you kidding me? It's March Madness. It's basketball season, baby.
I love me some basketball. That's awesome.
Yeah, I love that.
I didn't know. I thought you were kind of more of a pro wrestling kind of guy. So.
Oh, I love pro wrestling, man. I love pro wrestling. Can I take a seat? I know you're doing something, but come on. I mean, can I?
Well, is this going to take a while, or what are we doing here?
Don't look at my butt.
Oh, my Lord.
Okay, let me try this.
And that's when Facebook fooled the feed. You know what I'm saying?
I don't.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, baby. I'm good, man. I'm just watching this team.
You need anything?
Man, I'm telling you, I know more. I could do this myself.
You need anything? You comfortable?
Do you? I'm hungry. Do you have any food?
It's funny you bring that up.
Yeah.
Look at there.
Load me up, Daddy.
You ready? You're going to need something.
That's delicious. I can't hold that. But, yeah, I love basketball, though, man. I'm telling you, if they would let me be the coach, they'd win every game. Yeah.
You got it figured out?
Yeah, of course I do.
Well, who are you watching? Well, you have a favorite. I figured you're a wrestling guy.
Yeah, I love wrestling, but man, my team is the Colbsters. All right, the Colbsters.
I don't think I've ever heard of the Colbsters.
Yeah, no, yeah, they're led by kind of a wussy coach, you know. But it's okay.
I'm sorry.
They're so dumb though. If they would listen to me, like the coach, he doesn't have any clue. I'm trying to sit up, boss.
You okay?
The coach doesn't have any clue. Like seriously, if they would learn about adjustments,
yeah,
they would know what they're like. Oh, hold it. Are you?
I'm seeing
pass the ball.
Yeah.
Did you? Why don't they pass the ball?
Probably you're not hollering loud enough.
Call a timeout. Just you need to call a timeout.
You probably need to call a timeout right there. That'd be really good.
Timeout.
Oh, this is going to get better. Oh, Lord.
All right, Coach. That's a good call on the timeout. What do you want us to do next?
I'd like you to put some pants on. I think that's probably number one.
I do like those socks.
You don't have any pants on.
Hey, this ain't about me. Okay, you got a job to do, okay?
What do you want me to do?
I'd really like you to just play better. That's really what you could do.
I saw what they were talking about. Yeah.
I'm doing my best out there. I got the best guy in the league.
I'm doing my best out there. I got the best guy in the league. No, you stink.
Here, eat some chips.
Okay. I'm cool.
You're welcome. All right, Coach, what do you want me to do?
I want you to think about this. Sorry, I'm eating right now. I want you to think about this. What if you actually got the team together and you did a pick and roll? You know what I'm talking about?
Pick and roll. I did that the last 3 times down the court. Have you been watching or you been eating?
Well, obviously I've been eating, but you seem like you're a real tough guy. Why don't you listen to me?
You want to come and play?
About your job.
You want to come and play?
Yeah, I can play this
You
game.
can play.
All right.
Go
Y'all,
play.
no, let's just, you go. Y'all just,
I could what?
Let's just take this out. Here, take those two. The only champion a couch ever produces is a champion critic. You never win a championship if you're not in the game. And you can't be a champion if you're a critic. I've never met a wealthy gossip. They don't have time to tend to their business. They're too busy being in everybody else's business. I've never met really a successful critic. I mean, a lot of critics are successfully at average at best. And there are critics that need to tear everybody else down so they can elevate themselves. And anyone who has ever climbed to success while crushing others in the process, even when they got there, they weren't all that respected. Joshua, I will deliver them into your hands, but you got some work to do. You got to take the victory that I'm going to give you. And then he says this, not one of them will be able to withstand you. You need to keep the end in mind. Victory's coming. You need to remember that. You need to keep the end in mind. And so as I was studying this and I was reading Joshua 10 verse 8, like to me, that's almost like a Romans 8:28 verse. And Romans 8:28 says, and we know all things work together for good for those that love God and are called according to his purpose, right? The verse just says all things, but sometimes failure is included in the all. Sometimes pain is included in the all. Sometimes heartache is included in the all. Sometimes not getting my way is included in the all. Sometimes being disappointed is in the all. Sometimes being told no is in the all. Sometimes there's battle, there's war, there's struggle, but that's in the all things that God wants to turn into good. And the Lord said to Joshua, not one of them will be able to withstand you. What the verse doesn't say is this going to be bloody. What the verse doesn't say is, Joshua, you and your boys are going to see some horrific things. There's going to be people that die today. Some of your soldiers might be injured, Joshua. It doesn't say in this verse that you're going to have to march all night long. I can't even stay awake past 10 o'clock trying to watch a movie, right? It doesn't say, Joshua, you're going to be absolutely exhausted, but he promised victory. Not one of them will be able to withstand against you. Success comes through a process. And that process includes pain, that process includes failure, that process includes struggle, that process includes battle, and you thought that those things might disqualify you. And I'm here to tell you today that God says, I'm going to take all of that stuff that you've been through, all of the pain, all of the heartache, all of the mistakes, and I'm still going to turn that and use it in for your good. Not one of them will withstand you. You've got to keep the victory in the end in mind. Because I knew there was a battle. And because I knew there was a struggle, I got curious, and so I started looking and I started searching. And Joshua in his book is really good about giving details about battles. He's good about giving kings' names and their location and the name of their kingdom. So if there was a battle and it said all the enemy was destroyed, I had this question. How many Israelites died in that struggle? Because surely it was 1 against 5. Surely Joshua lost some men in that battle. And that would be a stinker, man. I mean, to grow up as a kid wandering in the wilderness and now's your time. In the third battle that you go into, you lose your life there. It was 1 against 5. Surely someone died. Surely there were a couple thousand casualties that the Israelites sustained. Maybe a couple of hundred people died. So I looked and I read and I looked. I even Googled. And all I could find was verse 15. It said, then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. So you're saying no one died. What I'm saying is the Bible tells me it says all. It says it in verse 29. It says it in verse 31. It says it in verse 34. And 36 and 38 and verse 43. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. Not one casualty was recorded. I'm going to give it into your hands. And there's going to be a battle. And you're going to see and hear horrific things. There might be some injuries. But verse 43, when Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. That's your daddy saying, I got you. I'm with you. Not one of them will withstand you. You've got to keep the end of the story in mind. You've got to keep the victory in mind. And success comes through a process. And probably the best part about Joshua 10 is not necessarily this brilliant military strategy that God gave to Joshua and how they had the position and the surprise and the sun at their back. Probably the coolest part of Joshua chapter 10 is the miracle that happens in the middle of the battle. Joshua knew he was taking on One nation against 5. One nation against 1 was going to take some time. One nation against 2 was going to take a little extra time. But he's going up against 5 kingdoms and 5 armies. God, I'm willing to go to war, but I'm going to have a little extra time. God, I realize you've given me an opportunity here, and I want to make the most of it, so I'm going to do what I can do. I'm going to walk through the door that you've opened for me, but God, I need you to do what only you can do. Verse 12. On the day the Lord gave the Ammonites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still and the moon stopped till the nation had avenged itself on its enemies. And that's written in the book of Jashar. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Fourth thing, you got to pray big prayers. You got to pray big prayers. God, I'll do my part. I'll understand that success has a process, but I'm going to need you to give me some time. Because I've got to not take on 1 army, 2 armies. I got to take on 5. I need you to give me some extra time. And God, I need you to give me some strength. Because we marched all night long uphill to get there. God, I need you to give me some extra breath in my lungs. God, I need you to do what only you can do. I'm going to do my part. But God, you do what only you can do. I had this moment as I was studying this and writing this down. I was kind of personally challenged in my own life. So what am I praying that's a big prayer? What prayer am I praying? God, you do what only you can do. And I sat back for a minute and I was a little bit convicted. But then I remember my boy Lance, who just a few short months ago was diagnosed with cancer. And the doctors never have good news. And I'm praying, God, do what only he can do. And I remember Miss Barbara. She's fighting cancer, fighting for her life. Takes 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. God, you do what only you can do. Then I remember my boy Bob, been in the hospital, stroke and seizures and just having a hard time. I remember other situations that are going on in families and in our church that I have no control over. God, I'm going to do all that I can do. I'm going to pray big prayers. I'm going to get some crazy up in here. But God, I'm going to ask you to do what only you can do. I'm going to make the choice to obey and not let fear dictate my destiny. I'm going to choose. I'm going to choose not to be afraid. God, I'm going to step into the opportunities. I'm going to walk through the doors you've opened for me. And I'm going to live and work and dream and pray and go and serve with the end of the story in mind and understand that success goes through a process.
Hey, thanks for watching this sermon on the Hillspring YouTube page. If you enjoyed it, take just a second, hit that subscribe button. That way you won't miss a single video. For more information about Hillspring, visit our website at hillspring.tv for times and location. We hope your faith was lifted and your life has been inspired with this message. Thanks again for watching.